LEGO KPop Demon Hunters, it is happening. Hey LEGO fans, I'm here with my Blocks buddy Kat to break down LEGO KPop Demon Hunters, talk about our hopes for the new theme that's coming from the LEGO group, some of the things that might happen, the things that we really want to happen, and really dig into this exciting new prospect for the LEGO group. So Kat, what is your initial reaction to the fact that there are going to be LEGO KPop Demon Hunters sets?
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled because this was my favourite film last year, and I have really been hoping that we would get Lego sets because we've had all the other merch. We've got Funko Pops, we've got Squishmallows. Hasbro have just announced a huge range of toys, including dolls for Huntrix. So the fact that we're getting Lego sets is basically the cherry on top now.
And so yeah, like just to bring people up to speed if they're not aware, the film came out last year. It was obviously a huge smash. Everyone was going wild for it. It was a runaway success on Netflix. And this kind of follows the Lego Group's relationship with Netflix. They've done Stranger Things, they've done Wednesday, and now we've got K-pop Demon Hunters. And just to warn everyone, there will be spoilers in this conversation. We're not holding back. The movie's been out for ages. So go over to Netflix and watch it if you don't want us to talk about the plot before you've seen it. But yeah, Kat, we've had K-pop Demon Hunters minifigures in Lego Fortnite. And so yeah, we think that there's a possibility that when the Lego group reveal the actual products, they might look like the minifigures that we're showing on screen right now, but also they could be entirely different. So can you talk us through the outfits that they chose for Lego Fortnite and how likely it is that these would make sense for the actual Lego sets?
Absolutely. So the minifigures in Lego Fortnite are the original outfits that the girls wear at the start of K-pop Demon Hunters. They're about to go on stage, they're about to perform one of their songs, and these are sort of very practical outfits to be dancing around on stage with. Rumi's got her signature yellow jacket, which has a lot of embroidery. It's got her name patch, and all of them are wearing sort of chunky boots. There's shoulder pads, not that you can really see them on these minifigures. And the details on these are definitely what I would want to see in sets because it's very important. All of their costumes have nods to other real K-pop groups and Korean culture. You can see actually a little bit in this photo that Zoe, you can see on her belt, she has a nonagai, which is like a tassel, but they all wear them, but you can particularly see it here. And that's a sort of a pendant for good fortune protection in Korean culture. And that's really what I want all of the characters, whether they're mini dolls or minifigures, to represent, is that they should carry over these very important cultural details into the actual set.
I think something you highlighted there that I think fans will be really hoping for with the detail and everything is the fact that these guys in Fortnite have got arm decoration and decoration on the side of their legs. Now, what we have found in Fortnite is sometimes because these minifigures you're playing on your TV screen, you're seeing them absolutely massive. They get a bit more detail than we get in actual minifigures that come in the products. So there may be a difference between the two. So fans might want to kind of ready their expectation for them not to quite live up to this, but I think we'll all be really hoping that they have full decoration on every surface that's available. And the other thing you touched on, though, was whether the sets will use minifigures or mini dolls. Do you have a suspicion one way or the other, and do you have a hope one way or the other?
I have a suspicion they will be mini dolls simply because that's what the Lego group did when they collaborated with Netflix for the Wednesday sets. However, when they collaborated for Stranger Things, they used minifigures. So you can't use the past records to completely judge it, but I just suspect that they might be mini dolls simply because the girls all use quite tall weapons. Rumi has a very big sword, as does Mira, and those might look a little bit better proportioned with a mini doll. And I was also thinking that the hairstyles on these minifigures are great. I would be very happy if we did get minifigures like this. But at the same time, mini dolls do tend to have a bit more expressive hairstyles. They use rubber molds much more frequently than minifigures. And I feel perhaps that will capture some of the movement, especially for Rumi's signature braid, which is really long and it's always swinging around when she's dancing and fighting demons. So I wouldn't really mind either way, but my preference actually would be mini dolls, because I think it would suit the style of the animation better.
So just before we carry on talking, I'm just going to let everybody know that the pictures we're now going to be having come up on the screen as we talk are different fan creations that people have submitted to LEGO Ideas. And the name of the fan creator is on each picture. So if you do want to look up what they've done from more angles and get a real taste and flavor for what they've created, you can go to the LEGO Ideas website and find those. But the other interesting thing that you raised there was how much this show is about the characters, because if you think there's different types of stories that the LEGO group bases the sets on, and there's things like Star Wars as a good example, where you've got starfighters and vehicles that are the core of it because they're so iconic, so recognizable, and lend themselves well to building sets. But in this case, it's such a character-driven thing that it feels like that has to be the focus with something like a BrickHeadz set, where you would really have the characters take center stage.
Absolutely. The whole heart and soul of K-pop Demon Hunters is the journey all three of the girls go through, but especially Rumi, as she progresses through this beautiful journey of healing and self-acceptance. And the friendship she has with Mira and Zoe is so important, as well as then the friendship she develops with Jinu from the rivaling Saja boys, who are demons in disguise. So it would make a lot of sense to distill that characterization down into very recognizable BrickHeadz. You would absolutely not be able to not recognize a bright yellow jacket and purple hair, or pink hair and Mira's black jacket, or Zoe's little buns, which you can't quite see on this minifigure, but she has little buns on the back of her head. And I think another possibility that they may be considering is that BrickHeadz are perfect small display models. Even if you don't have much room for your K-pop Demon Hunters collection, some BrickHeadz won't take up much space. Just put them on a shelf, put them on a desk, and you've got a little bit of the story wherever you are.
And for those of us who are willing to let our entire houses get taken over by Lego sets, Kat, what would a kind of dream K-pop Demon Hunters range look like for you? What, like, we've got the one set coming out this year, but it sounds like next year is when it's going to be big. What would you like it to look like? There's so many different expressions of Lego that we have now. We have the minifigure and mini doll stuff that we touch on, but we also have display models and things. What would your kind of dream theme look like?
I think my dream theme would mainly be a selection of sets based on the main story beats. So you've got the plane at the start of the movie, where the girls initially fight the demons in this amazing introduction to the film. That particular sequence is an absolute highlight, as they're singing and just fighting these demons so amazingly. But then we've got the stages where they perform their songs, such as Golden, and all of these locations are based on real life places in Seoul. So I think that would also be something that I would hope the range would focus on, is bringing these real places to life. One that I would love, and I always mention it when I talk about the prospect of this kind of theme, is Naksan Park, which has the historic old Seoul city wall. And that's where Rumi has quite the emotional heart-to-heart with Jinu, and she starts to begin to accept herself and realize that demons are not these evil beings that she's been taught they are her whole life. So that's a very iconic part of Seoul that they incorporated into the movie, and it would make a perfect little set, just with the wall, those two characters, maybe some of the forest scenery around them. And then one other thing I would absolutely love is a buildable version of Derpy with Sassy. not minifigure scale, not mini doll scale, but an actual buildable figure. Because just look at them. Derpy is the tiger, Sussy is the magpie. So this is based on Chosun era artwork, which was quite satirical, and that's what's inspired these characters when they were making the film, though Derpy is never blue in any of the original artwork, but he looks amazing. And he goes around delivering letters between Genu and Rumi, while Sussy is always just watching Derpy's antics. So if we could have a set like this, sort of like the Toothless set we just had, with those very big expressive eyes and focusing on the character, the emotion being portrayed, that would be the first set I would buy.
Yeah, I think the Lego have gotten so good at these big, rounded animated characters. You know, like if you think back to the early times when there were Lego statue sets of characters, they were quite blocky, square, didn't have the cuteness factor that some of the characters had on screen. Whereas, as you say, you know, Toothless, Winnie the Pooh, Stitch, all of these guys, they just look so rounded and cartoony, and it would it'd be fantastic to get Derpy in that sort of style. But did you know about the LEGO KPop Demon Hunters announcement the second it happened? If you didn't, then you need to go to the address on screen now. It's also in the description, and sign up for the free Blocks newsletter, because we will tell you the second that new LEGO sets get announced, and you'll know before your friends. So you'll be the person who gets to tell them all about LEGO KPop Demon Hunters, or whatever the next exciting announcement is. So go over to the website and make sure you're signed up for that. But Kat, switching back to thinking through what might be coming from the LEGO group, we've talked about what we want to happen. Do you have any suspicions as to what the theme might look like, based on other things that we've had in the past, other themes that are based on movies and IPs and so on?
I think probably the best ones to compare it to are going to be Wicked and the LEGO Wednesday theme, because those are either a Netflix production or a musical. And one thing that is very prominent in KPop Demon Hunters is the music, K-pop music. So almost all of the huge scenes and the most memorable scenes are done to music. It's one of the reasons that the films took so long to animate, is because the girls and every other character are moving to the beat of the music, which is just amazing when you watch it and the lyrics are coming up on screen. So I think what they probably are going to focus on, I would suspect, are smaller scale sets where you've got the characters and, like this, the stage where they're performing on, with the very typical Korean art there in the background, and possibly the girls' mansion where they live, because that has a lot of play features as well. And there's different outfits, the food, the couch. So if we're looking at the play value, then I think still the plane from the beginning of the movie, because who doesn't like reenacting a huge action sequence? The girls' home, perhaps more like a sort of friend set there. One of the stages where they're performing, and I would be very surprised if they didn't feature the Saja Boys somehow. So you might be looking at a outdoor small set with some of them included. I would be surprised if all of the Saja Boys came in the same set. But then we may also get, like we did with Wicked, we had the sort of music box style sets where you had Glinda and Elphaba built as characters. I could also see that working for the girls, for all of the members of Huntrix. And if we're also looking at Wednesday, Wednesday also had one of those sort of music box style sets, which also would give the designers an excuse to include more minifigure or more mini doll variants for all the costumes, because there are so many costumes to choose from.
Yeah, I think the more we talk about it, the bit that seems most tantalizing for me, and perhaps it's just because I'm kind of an old school Lego purist, but the minifigure stuff, or mini doll, whichever what it ends up being, My preference would probably be minifigures, just because that's always my go-to. But either way, I think that kind of scale seems the most tantalizing, especially the more you've talked about the different locations and things that could be offered as part of that, because it could actually build out a collection that you could kind of build a world with. Whereas the thing I always struggle with sometimes the different scales and things that Lego might do within a theme is that they don't always display together as well as you might like, and you can't kind of necessarily build a layout in the same way that you can. Because I also like you talked about the locations in Seoul, like the mansion and things, the private plane and everything. The more you think about things like that, you can see how this will have appeal to K-pop Demon Hunters fans. But there's probably a whole bunch of other Lego fans who will end up picking some of these up just because the locations and the buildings and the vehicles and things are just really cool and just really would fit in with other Lego sets.
Absolutely. And if you think about the way that the LEGO Group are trying to conquer the Southeast Asian market through themes like Ninjago, the festivals, the different Chinese festivals, then if they reproduced the actual locations of Seoul through K-pop Demon Hunters set, then that's your ticket to trying to enter the Korean market, because of course they would want Lego representations of places where they actually go or see in their day-to-day.
Yeah.
And I think it would be wonderful if the designers, no matter what set they do produce, do try and incorporate some of the Korean culture and the Korean influences into them, because of how important it is to the story of K-pop Demon Hunters. And if they can adapt that into the set, I think it wouldn't just appeal to the wider market, then it would really appeal to the Korean market where the film is based.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I really hope that they don't hold back, because you touched on the fact that some of the minifigures might be spread out, or mini dolls might be spread out across different sets. So you have to collect multiple sets to build up the whole cast. But I hope the 3 core characters are in as many sets as possible in different outfits, because I think that's where the real collectibility would be with this, is getting all of the different outfits from the film. If you think about Marvel, right, everyone's obsessed with tracking down every variation of Iron Man's armor. And as someone who likes Marvel but isn't an obsessive fan, I can often not notice the difference. But with this, it's going to be really apparent that you've got all these different outfits and all these different variations from different points in the movie.
I mean, this photo and my screensaver are both the original outfits that the girls start off the movie in, but they've got casual wear that they go out and about in, which is just hoodies and jeans, basically. When they're relaxing in their mansion, their penthouse, they've got comfortable bathrobes. For when they're performing Golden, they have obviously gold and white outfits. And if they're going undercover to try and slay demons, then they have sort of black tactical gear. And that's just some of the costumes. That's not even all of them.
Which is your most desired costume out of all of them? Which one do you really want to see made?
Oh, I think the 2 that they really need to do are the original outfits, which are sort of yellow and teal and blue, and the golden outfits, which are gold, black and white, because those are the ones they're wearing when they're singing perhaps some of the most memorable or iconic songs from the film. Although, shout out to Rumi's pajamas, because if they did the pajamas with the trains on her pajama bottoms, that would also be a super collectible figure.
I feel like we need a collectible minifigure series. I don't think the sets are going to be enough for all of the options that are available.
That would just be perfect, really. Just give us every option, and it could also allow them to bring in perhaps some of the side characters, like Rumi's mum, their manager Bobby. Although I would hope that Bobby would make it into a main set. But if these types of characters didn't, then it would give them the opportunity to have all of these little cameos of characters who are still really important to the story.
And we started talking about this a little bit earlier, but you mentioned the kind of sort of small doll style sets that were in Wednesday and in Wicked as well. But then there's also been different types of figures in Harry Potter. There's been busts and things in Marvel. There's been a really wide range of ways of representing characters in Lego sets. Do you have any preferred ways? Like, if a Lego group do go down that route of doing statues of the characters, do you have a kind of preference or a version of that you think would lend itself really well to these characters?
I think the best version would still be those doll-like ones that we've seen in Wicked and Wednesday, simply because the face plates that they use for those characters have very detailed character expressions printed on them, which could capture the eyeliner and the makeup and even perhaps some of the crazy expressions that the girls make, because the animation style does often do heart eyes and things like that, which you couldn't really capture in a bust. And I also feel that with a bust, you would perhaps lose some of the hair. It would look a little bit sort of strange just to have a bust of Rumi, but without the entirety of her braid. So I do still think the doll-like characters are probably the ones that would just lend themselves to the animation style and the uniqueness of the animation style.
It would be really great if they had like swappable faceplates as well, like multiple different expressions that you could switch in and out. That would be a really nice way to lend the kind of Lego vibe to it. And do something that like you can't get maybe in some of the stuff that's coming from Hasbro, Mattel, Funko, and so on. Because I think that's going to be the really interesting thing, is there's going to be so much KPop Demon Hunters merch. Like, everyone missed the boat on it when the film came out, but no one's going to make that mistake again. So the trick for the Lego group is going to be to offer something that is uniquely Lego and fits in with what the brand does. Do you think there's any other ways that the Lego group could collaborate with Netflix on KPop Demon Hunters? Like, are there any adjacent things to the actual sets and products that could be done that would be kind of, we've seen lots of interesting collaborations between, Lego and other brands. They've even been working with, like F1 and FIFA recently, but obviously over the years, things like Star Wars. So what could we speculate about with what Lego group might do with KPop Demon Hunters beyond the products?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things they could do. One of the ones that instantly comes to mind is the fact that they could do a Lego version of the KPop Demon Hunters album. So there are already a bunch of different variants of the album, including store exclusives, a golden version, and a couple of more, which is very typical of K-pop albums in general. So if you're a K-pop collector, you don't just get one album, you get several, or all of them, or you just stick with your bias. So I think they could do a version of the album with either the mini dolls or the minifigures on the cover, or some kind of stickers, which are brick-based versions of the characters. There's plenty they could do there. Another thing I was thinking is the fact that because we have the two groups in the film, we have Huntrix and the Saja Boys. They both have light sticks. Again, very common. All K-pop groups have their own official light sticks. And it could be very possible to do a Lego version, a brick-built version of the light sticks. Obviously, they wouldn't light up, but you'll be using the branding from the film to basically make your own. So I think that would be quite a cool thing. And I don't know whether they would consider doing it, but the Netflix store has a host of branded t-shirts and other elements of clothing, which could simply have, again, whichever it is, minifigures or mini doll versions of the group on the t-shirt, on the jacket, with the Lego and Huntrix branding, which would look really cool.
Oh no, all of those things sound really tantalizing. I think especially the idea of the album, it's kind of like, it's such a cool collectible that really lends itself to K-pop Demon Hunters so specifically that it feels like it would be something a bit special and a bit different to what the Lego group traditionally does in these partnerships. But But yeah, I think what's really apparent to me, Kat, just from talking through it all with you and hearing your take on it as someone who's a real fan of the movie, is just how much opportunity there is here and just how big it could be and how expansive it could be. And what a vibrant, colourful part of the Lego portfolio it could be. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you want to throw in as we sort of wrap things up?
I think the only thing that I haven't mentioned, which I definitely should, is that one thing I really hope the Lego designers focus on is no matter what sets we get, I really do hope that they don't just weave in these real places from Seoul that the movie takes place in, but that they also weave in the cultural references either through printed posters and things that have the Hangul written on them, or adverts for ramyeon. And rather than reusing elements, I would love to see some newly molded pieces for tteokbokki, for kimbap, just for Mira's sword, which is a traditional Korean moon sword. I want to see these references in the sets because KPop Demon Hunters, one of the reasons it's been so successful is the homages it pays to its culture. And considering how much attention to detail the designers have put into including references to Japanese culture and Ninjago, adding the Mandarin characters to almost all of the Chinese New Year sets that we've had, I want that same level of care and attention put into the world of LEGO KPop Demon Hunters, because that's what would really make it stand apart then. None of the Funkos or Squishmallows or the Mattel dolls, they can't include things like Hangul, Ramyeon, and other parts of the culture, which would be perfect for these sets. And again, a bit like Wicked, I think another little cool thing, I'm not sure if they're going to do it, put the QR code stickers on. The one time I will say put stickers on so that you can listen to the songs while you're building, because KPop Demon Hunters is a musical, and that would be another great element to include to tie it in with the movie.
That's such a great point, and everything you said about the elements, I wholeheartedly agree with. And let's hope that's why we've got to wait until 2027 for most of the sets, because there's so much time being spent on molding new elements and things and doing all the very finely detailed work that needs to be done to do a brand new theme in a really sort of primo way. But do let us know in the comments, do you want minifigures or mini dolls? What new elements are you hoping for? What are your most desired things from LEGO KPop Demon Hunters? And don't forget, if you want to find out more about LEGO KPop Demon Hunters, if you want to read Kat's reviews of the sets as soon as that she gets her hands on them, go over to blocksmag.com, take out a subscription to Blocks Magazine, and make sure that you're set up to have the best possible experience with the LEGO hobby. And Kat, thanks so much for talking us through all things LEGO KPop Demon Hunters. I'm sure there's going to be more to talk about, as we get closer to the sets coming out and as we actually see these things announced.